As of recording this on October 24th, 2022, the game Gotham Knights has been out for about 2 days, which means it's been about 3 to 4 days since reviews have been flooding your YouTube feed. In such a short amount of time, it's starting to look like a very divisive entry, with some calling it a welcome addition for those with an Arkham itch that needs to be scratched after 7 years, while others believe the quality to not be up to its $60 to $70 asking price. Most mainstream reviewers have been giving the game an average tepid score of 6 out of 10, with IGN giving it a 5 out of 10. While we could write this off as another contrast in taste between fans and critics, the Steam user review also sits at mixed. The question is, why is there so much pushback on a game that originally started with overwhelming positive feedback 2 years ago? Following its announcement, and why did so many come to hate the new interactive media and see it as a pariah, unable to live up to Rockstar's previous trilogy? More than 2 years ago, Warner Brothers' Gotham Knights was announced to much excitement, with gameplay footage following not too long after. Outside of a level system and a health bar on enemies which slightly raised some eyebrows, everyone was looking towards getting their hands on Gotham Knights. For the most part, Warner Brothers seemed to have an anticipated title on their hands. Unfortunately, as time passed, more cracks began to rear themselves. March 9th of 2021, game news site Polygon posted that Gotham Knights was delayed into its definitive October 2022 release date. Some of the consumers took the delay with skepticism, but for the most part were optimistic. This being that moving out the release date would ultimately give breathing room for the developers to work out any kinks in the combat and optimization for the overall performance. A very true comment on game development by Miyamoto goes, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rush game is forever bad." This phrase is why I didn't see too many red flags with this statement. This, by many now, wasn't the case. Warner Brothers' comments on wanting to give the best experience to gamers will later age like milk. On May 10th, 2022, the Red Hood and Nightwing gameplay trailer drops. To my dismay and many others, the leveling system had become more apparent, with a grind for loot model that seemed very much out of place. I unfortunately don't have enough time to go over this in detail right now, but alarms began to go off. The other glaring issue was the combat seemed to be nowhere near as refined as previous Batman entries. And no, we are not talking about something as unimportant as Nightwing traversing with a Fortnite glider. We are talking about the actual combat mechanics. The gameplay showed both characters attacking at a sluggish pace and weird wind-ups, with movement from enemy to enemy seeming very janky. In some scenes in the trailer, you can see it takes Nightwing 3 awkward backflips to get to another enemy. Again, to beat the dead horse, the Arkham series already refined this exact kind of combat, with its last entry on the previous console generation. Here's Phoenix Phantom's video on a combat and visual comparison between Arkham Knight and the trailer. It's because of the Arkham series why we now have games like Shadow of Mordor and Spider-Man 2018 that took the foundation that the Arkham series laid out and built upon it to be as great as they feel in combat. And yes, I understand that this game is not developed by Rocksteady Studios, and some people may think it's unfair to compare two different developers. However, I want to make the point that if you are marketing your game mechanics and combat heavily off of a previous game series, this being the Batman Arkham series, then you are more than open for criticism, especially when WB Montreal were the developers behind the Arkham Origins game, whose combat was one of the main positives given out by reviewers and players. But wait, there's more salt on the wounds. On the same day as the new gameplay trailer, websites such as Eurogamer and IGN announced that the last-gen release for the game was now console, this being the PS4 and the Xbox One X. Video Game Chronicles quotes the Warner Brothers announcement, quote, "Please note, to provide players with the best possible gameplay experience, the game will release on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X/S, and PC, and will not be available for PlayStation 4 or Xbox One consoles. Keep this in mind." So now, 5 months prior to launch, We were being told that Warner Brothers was axing all previous gen ports of the game, leaving many customers upset and alienated. On top of this, we now had a gameplay trailer showing more concerns of the combat formula and the progression system. All of this ended up seeing a lot of people beginning to cancel their pre-orders. This all said, the game had not come out yet. What if the release product made up for the controversy? On October 21st, 2022, Gotham Knights released to the public, and the hits unfortunately kept coming. We should probably talk about the elephant in the room, the optimization in Gotham Knights. Again, remember that quote: to provide players with the best possible gameplay experience, the game will release on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC, and will not be available for PlayStation 4 or Xbox One consoles. Yeah, that wasn't the case. About 8 to 10 days prior to this recording, WB Montreal announces that the current gen consoles will only run the game at 30 frames per second. I want to make this clear. Warner Brothers canceled the Xbox One and PS4 ports to make more time for proper optimization on the current generation consoles, which are compared to an $800 or up to $1,000 gaming PC. Some we still couldn't get a game and had less going on and less detail in its open world than, again, Arkham City or Arkham Knight to run at 60 frames per second? I don't find this to be the slightest bit believable. Sure, the argument could be made that a game running at 30 frames per second is a deal breaker for purchase on its own might be a bit much, but the fact that this information was withheld until right before launch left a sour taste in many people's mouths, especially after talking about canceling previous gen consoles for refined fidelity, only to end up blaming it on the Xbox Series S, a console, mind you, that can run at 1440p and upscale to 4K resolution and 120 frames per second depending on the output in the game, being made to unable handle it. I believe that not to be likely at all. People already spent over $600, even more if you purchased a PS5 or Xbox Series X during early quarantine, to look forward to next generation performance, but only providing what was the norm to generations ago seems a little less of the issue being the consoles and more that not enough work was put into properly optimizing the game. Okay, so let's forget about the consoles for one moment and talk about the PC experience, which was promoted as still being able to reach 60 frames per second at the minimum. This also is not the case. I want to reference YouTuber Some Ordinary Gamers, who in his video about the game was using a Ryzen 5950X CPU and a 4090 GPU, which currently is one of the best graphics cards you can get. Showing the performance of his game to the public, it was only hitting an average of 47 frames per second and hitting as low as 38 frames per second while he was traveling the open world, which had no active NPCs on it, which in comparison to an Arkham game from over 10 years ago has no right to be struggling to keep such a constant frame rate. Not convinced? YouTuber Luke Stevens also explains he was running into a similar problem with his 5950X CPU and 3080 GPU combo, both of which are normally more than enough to be running almost anything at max graphic settings. However, due to the poor optimization, Luke's video shows his game unable to keep a steady 60 frames per second, even with ray tracing off, which means volumes when you consider how capable the 3080 should be. Here's Tech MK's video showing the Core i9 12900K CPU and a 3080 graphics card running Cyberpunk 2077, another demanding game, at over 135 frames per second at max setting. I cannot stress this enough. Go watch Nick Tech's video showing the graphics and detail comparison between Warner Brothers Montreal's Gotham Knights and Rocksteady's Arkham Knights from 2015, seeing not only how much more fluid the combat was, but how much more detail and activity has been added to a game that came out almost a decade now. Makes the belief that this was because current gen couldn't handle it a little more harder to believe. In short, between withholding information so close to its official launch, poor optimization, even after extensive delays, a leveling system that seems more like the skeleton of a previous Games of Life service model, and what many believe to be a watered down version of the Batman Arkham formula, it's no surprise so many people are unhappy with the finished product. At the same time, the game isn't outright terrible. I can definitely see a lot of people having fun with it in this new title, anyways. Over time, they may be able to tune up some of these issues and fix some of it, but as it stands now, the game isn't worth the asking price of $60 to $70. The combat looks and feels sluggish, there's unwanted grind and leveling systems, constant bugs, and poor optimization. There's really nothing here to warrant this as a next gen Batman game you need to pick up. Here's to hoping a smoother ride for Suicide Squad's Kill the Justice League next year. I'm really rooting for that game and really hope everything works out for it and that the extra year delay was worth it. Thanks for listening to me, and take care.